That's wrong. Fifthly, because of the false teaching about the sacraments. By the way, Roman Catholicism, if I was going to display it for you, it would be an IV bag. Have you ever been in the hospital and seen a person that has an IV in their arm, and they have a little four-wheel stand with an IV bag on it, and they're walking down the hallway connected to the bag, getting their drip, but they're trying to get exercise. So they have to have the IV into their arm to walk. That's what the sacraments are. Every drip, every time you go to the Catholic Church, every time that you go to confession, every time that you go and do your penance assignment, every time you go and get the sacraments, you're getting another drip. But you can't make it to heaven with all those drips. You only go to purgatory unless you're a saint.
I'm not sure how to unpack that one. I guess I'll use his own argument against him. Being a Protestant is like being connected to an IV bag, where you have a diluted version of communion, where all you do is drink grape juice and, eat a saltine cracker. Not even bread, you eat a cracker. You take this cracker, you think really hard about Jesus, and so, in that, vague, abstract, dripping of the IV bag, you can't get to heaven on IV drip, and then the same thing with baptism. I'm assuming, based on the layout of his church and what the very, few things that I know about John Barnett, which is that he probably ascribed to some form of Baptist theology, where, according to Baptists, you can get rebaptized. They don't actually confess one baptism for the forgiveness of sins. You can get rebaptized, right? So even, baptism doesn't actually mean anything. It's just a vague abstract symbol of you getting wet, which to me sounds like an IV bag. And so being a Protestant is like, being tied to an IV, well, you have drips of the fluid, going through you. And in order for you to make it to heaven, according to the Protestant, you have to, just have vague, abstract drops of IV fluid. Oh, and then, knowing what I know about, Baptist theology, right? They ascribe to once saved, always saved. And, if you decide to not become Christian, well, then it must mean you were never a Christian in the first place, because that's what once saved, always saved is. That, if you're saved, there's nothing you can do that will cause you to lose your salvation. And so, say you did leave the faith, it must mean you were just never saved in the first place. And so you can't get to heaven unless you believe that specific doctrine, because, a real Christian would never leave the faith. And so, to me, being a Protestant is like being on an IV bag. Like here, I just, like, I don't think he realizes, that when he makes an argument like that, it can just very easily be turned against him. I can just frame my words a certain way to, ascribe to, Protestantism, or I would say evangelical Protestantism, the very things he's ascribing to Roman Catholicism. And again, he's not giving biblical, like, what, it would be one thing if he took the text the Catholic Church uses to, present the queenship of Mary, or, the arguments for the sacraments from the scriptures. Or if it would be one thing if he took the best of the Catholic arguments for the doctrines he just talked about and then debunked those. But he's just giving general statements with a very shallow, exposition on what those things are. And then, arguing against doctrines that aren't even being presented by the Catholic Church.
And there are a few saints, and they canonize them every 100 years or whenever they do it. But everybody else goes to purgatory, which totally negates that Jesus Christ offered one sacrifice for sin. It's just a terrible, terrible false teaching. Sixthly, the Roman Catholic Church is
all purgatory is, and I'll give the kind of basic overview of what it is. Okay, so I'm going to give a quick exposition on one of the verses that talk about purgatory in the New Testament, in 1 Corinthians 3:11. For no one can lay a foundation other than that which is laid, which is Jesus Christ. Now, if anyone builds on the foundation with gold, silver, and precious stones, wood, hay, or straw, each one's work will become manifest, for the day will disclose it, because it will be revealed by fire, and the fire will test what sort of work each one has done. If the work that one has built on the foundation survives, he will receive a reward. If anyone's work is burned up, he will suffer loss, though he himself will be saved, but only as through fire. The thing is that, yeah, like this here, you know, you can make an argument for why perhaps this might be exclusively talking about like a day of hardship or a day of tribulation, but the day he's speaking of right here, each one's work will manifest, for the day will disclose it, right? What is the day if not the day that you face God? Like when I read a verse like that where, you know, Paul is saying, you know, the day will disclose it, I guess my question would be, to a Protestant, what is that day? And then the second verse or segment that alludes to purgatory in the New Testament is Matthew 5:22 to 26, where Jesus is giving the Sermon on the Mount, and, you know, he's saying that everyone who is angry with his brother will be liable to judgment, and whoever insults his brother will be liable to the count, and whoever says you fool will be liable to the hell of fire. So if you are offering your gift at the altar, remember that your brother has something against you, leave your gift there and go and reconcile with your brother, and then come and offer your gift. Come to terms quickly with your accuser while you're going with him to court, lest your accuser hand you over to the judge, and the judge to the guard, and you be put in prison. Truly I say to you, you will never get out until you've paid the last penny. So if this is a metaphor for heaven and hell, what is it that you will never get out of until you pay the last penny? Right? And so what this is alluding to, and this is what the doctrine of purgatory simply is, it's not a place where you wait or, you know, you go forever. The purgation process is simply, right, the purification of, right, the sinful state of man, you know, before you enter heaven, right, the sinful state of man before you enter heaven, trying to enter into the perfection that is heaven. In the book of Revelation, it says, right, unless you are perfect, you cannot enter heaven. No human who dies is perfect, right? And so when the soul and you are attached to certain sins, right, to enter heaven, right, the day will reveal, or not the day, when you enter heaven, right, there needs to be a separation of your attachment from your sins. You are forgiven of them, but you yourself, the individual, have to be, you know, purified and cleansed of your attachment to specific sins. Like, that's what it is. It's not this sort of vague abstract concept of, you know, oh, if you know, weren't good enough to make it into heaven, but you weren't bad enough to get into hell, you're just going to go to purgatory. No, it's a state of spiritual cleansing. It's not anything to do with, you know, whether or not you're forgiven. You are forgiven. It's just that you, the individual soul, still need to lose your attachment to the sins that you have.
Teaching about purgatory is absolute falsehood. And finally, most of Roman Catholicism's rites are tied to ancient paganism.
So again, he just kind of threw a last-minute accusation there. A lot of Romanism is tied to paganism, but he doesn't actually prove it. He just kind of says it. I'm not gonna lie, I thought this would be a bit more, you know, he would throw in, you know, the verses that the Catholic Church uses to, you know, affirm and state the, you know, doctrines of purgatory and all the stuff with Mary and all these other things. But he doesn't do that. He just kind of throws an accusation out there and then just sort of expects us to accept it. He didn't prove his point. So, you know, with that, I'm a little disappointed. You know, this wasn't the most nuanced approach to, you know, the Catholic Church. So yeah, I'll leave it at that. Yeah. With that being said, God bless. And get out there and make better. Happen daily.